Good morning, guys. Today's video we're going to talk a little bit about jobs to do in the autumn. So unfortunately it's now sort of beginning of September and there's starting to be a bit of a change in the garden, although here in England we're in the middle of a bit of a heat wave at the minute, hence why I'm doing this video really early in the morning. So if you hear the birds tweeting a lot, that's why. So what I'm going to do really now is just go through a list of jobs that sometime in the autumn, sort of between September to December, that sort of I think we should be doing in the garden to ensure success for next year. Now, for most of us, I think the main job we're all going to be doing is harvesting. So just something I'll quickly show you right now, which I'm really excited to do. My knife is man enough again. There we go. And my first baby bear pumpkin. So this is a small sort of eating variety of pumpkin that I really like making soups with and things. So when you're harvesting pumpkins, you want to leave as much stalk as possible because the stalk will dry out, and the stalk is what prevents any bacteria or anything getting inside the pumpkin. So as much stalk as possible. Ideally, you could have like a little T branch here, but obviously that cuts off anything further downstream, and I've got another pumpkin there. So this time I've just gone for as long a stalk as possible. That'll dry and go brown, and it will then protect what's in there. The other thing to do is just check it over for any real big blemishes or anything, and if there is, it means you've probably got to eat it fairly soon. But this is a really nice pumpkin, so I can leave it in like a sort of dry, sort of cool, dry spot to for the skin to sort of harden and cure, and then that would store for quite a long time. One thing to say is I think the smaller the pumpkin is, the longer it stores. If you've got really big pumpkins, they won't store as long as the smaller ones. So another job that you absolutely have to do in autumn is your bulb planting. So what I've got here is a little shady sort of corner, and I've got sort of a native holly bush growing up here. It's quite a juvenile one, so as you can see it's very thin at the minute, but it's going to get much bigger, much taller, much wider and fill up this space. But what I'm going to do for this year is plant some snowdrop bulbs in and around the soil. So little tip as well, and I actually picked these up from the supermarket Asda, which is a British supermarket, for just £2, and I think there's about 10 bulbs in here. And like with a lot of bulbs, if the bulb doesn't get damaged or anything like that, it's basically a perennial. It's going to come back every spring. So for £2 for 10 bulbs, which come January when snowdrops come out and flower and things, will really fill up this space quite nicely. I think that's an absolute bargain. Now the other thing as well, and I'll just sort of show you the snowdrop bulbs that I've got. The smaller the bulb, the less deep it has to be buried. Bulbs you bury quite deep, but with snowdrops, for example, I'm only going to bury these maybe, I think 5 centimeters or something like that. It's going to be quite shallow, but I'll do a little close-up of it. But that's the bulb, and you just want to plant it face down in a hole at the required depth and bury it over, and that's bulbs really. Bulbs are really great to be for any garden in the springtime, but it's something that you need to do now in autumn. So if you're not ready to give up on sowing just yet, there is this book. Now I'm not affiliated with Charles Dowding or anything, but this is How to Grow Winter Vegetables by Charles Dowding. Really good as well, because it talks about what to sow late summer, autumn time and things. So some really nice pages in here where it's sort of telling you what in each month exactly what you can sow, and it's stuff that you might not have necessarily thought about, sort of thing. So it talks here about like broad beans for green manures and things like that, corn salads obviously in September, and obviously garlic and things like that in September and October as well. So if you do want to keep sowing, I suggest you get yourself some advice from a man who's got 40 years gardening experience, and pick up a copy of How to Grow Winter Vegetables. Next thing I want to talk about is mulching. Now, I think mulching in autumn is the best time, and the reason I think that is because I think in mulching in autumn you're kind of mimicking what nature does. So obviously in autumn leaves fall off the tree, fall onto the ground, and create that barrier like mulch on the soil and things. So to me it makes sense to try and copy that, a bit of a sort of permacultural principle, but copying that by putting your mulches down on your your flower beds and your vegetable beds in autumn. So all I'm going to be doing really is putting down a sort of, I don't know, maybe 1.5 to 2 inch layer of compost over the vegetable beds. Some of them will be topped up a bit more because they sink a lot, quite frankly, and they're more aesthetically pleasing when I think they're full up. However, on the garden beds, I'm going to be reusing some of this stuff. So my tomatoes, unfortunately, sort of got blight, so I've had to sort of cut them down, throw away most of them. Now, there is a bit of a risk using soil that's maybe had a diseased plant in, but with blight, it's generally a fungal spore, which is only around for a certain amount of the year. So I'm going to use this on my sort of perennial flower beds as a mulch, so I'm not going to be too worried about it. And I suggest you do the same. I wouldn't take the risk of putting in vegetable beds, especially if you're growing something like potatoes, which is also susceptible to blight. I don't know enough about it. I wouldn't take that risk. But you don't, especially when you've got, quite a lot of bulky matter here. You've been pouring in lots of liquid feeds and things. In my case here, I've also just cut the plants. I've left the roots in the soil. Those roots will break down and release nutrients as well. So I think it's really good soil to use. I wouldn't necessarily just compost it or throw it out. I think it's really good to use as a sort of mulch to put down in autumn. So just while I'm sort of doing this, I thought I'd talk about like what is a mulch, why we do it. Not everyone necessarily knows. So a mulch is basically just a layer of something that you put on top of the soil. In this country, best thing to put down is a layer of compost. The reason you don't put down like wood chip or anything else like that is because you'll probably get loads of slugs. Whereas if you put down compost, it's going to be fine. Now, what mulch does is it basically adds fertility into the soil, and also basically acts as a weed barrier. So if you've got weed, you're sort of excluding light to the soil. So weeds are less likely to sort of grow. Basically, they're going to remain fairly dormant in their sort of seed form, and that's fine. So that's pretty much why we do it. The other thing as well is mulch, moisture retention. So by having a layer of mulch on the soil, any sort of water in the soil is less likely to evaporate because there's that layer sort of protecting it. So that's pretty much why we do it. And again, like I said, I think the best time is to do it in autumn. So I'm really excited to get into this autumn job. I'm not quite ready yet. Is fruit tree planting. So here I've got this part of the bed which I haven't really done anything with. I've just thrown a few annuals and a few different perennials in here. Annuals are obviously going to die when the frost comes. Perennials I'll probably dig up and put into some pots until I decide what to do with them. But what I want to do here in this big space between a sort of sequoia tree and a small sort of hedge I've got here is plant a plum tree. So not a particularly big one, hoping for something that grows maybe 8-9 foot maximum. So it's probably gonna be like maybe a pixie rootstock or something. And I'm gonna make a whole video on planting fruit trees and the different rootstocks and things, but it's something you want to do in the autumn. The reason with fruit trees in the autumn is there's still enough warmth in the soil for the roots to get in and, good growth and things. But there's also enough moisture for the tree to sort of survive, but it's not too cold. So autumn is generally the sort of best time to plant fruit trees. Right, another job for autumn, and this is something I'm going to be experimenting with this year, is overwintering chili plants. So you can grow chilies from seed fairly easy. The seeds are quite hard to germinate and they grow really slow. So in this summer, we haven't had a particularly hot summer. This is as big as they've got. Now I've got loads of beautiful red chilies here, and I've got a few tiny little sort of greeny yellowing sort of habaneros. So I'm gonna make a video on overwintering chilies. Now, the time you want to do this is when the sort of nighttime temperatures get down to about 10 degrees. For us, that's typically sometime sort of, I think it's end of October is what I was sort of looking at last night. But about, sort of end of October, these need to get brought indoors, and there's a whole series of sort of pruning that needs to be done to ensure that they go into a sort of state of dormancy, ready to spring back into life in the spring and give you a really early sort of chili crop, and a much bigger chili crop as well. So that's one of the benefits of overwintering chilies. But I'm going to experiment with this, and yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. The final thing I think worth doing in autumn, because you've got a bit more time and things, you're not necessarily having to do all the watering and the sowing that you were doing in sort of spring and summer, is to sort of take stock of your tools and things, see maybe what got broken, what got damaged and things, look at replacing it and things, and also looking after your tools. If you've got things that need secateurs and need sharpening, for example, get that done, while that, you know, there's maybe a bit of a lull in, you know, the sort of jobs to do on the garden and things like that. But yeah, look after your tools, look after, you know, your sort of growing space as well and things, so that that way, you know, when it gets underway back in spring, everything's gonna be nice and organized, sort of ready to go. So that was jobs to do in autumn. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, don't forget to like and subscribe. And what we're going to be doing sort of going forward is maybe making a seasonal what to do on the garden plot, whatever, in each season. Because I think in winter there's some different things to do, like for example, ordering your seeds, taking a look at your seeds. That's a really great winter job to do indoors. And there's loads to obviously to do in spring and summer, but I'll probably make a sort of priority highlight list of ones to do. But yeah, hopefully you really enjoyed this video. There's still lots to come, planting fruit trees and things like that. There's sort of autumn, lots on harvesting and preserving still. So yeah, stay tuned. And thank you again to all my sort of new subscribers. I've had quite a bump in subscription to my channel. So thank you for everyone to subscribing, and see you all soon.